Hello my friends and welcome back to the next video of our Divide and Conquer version 5 faction overview series, this time taking on the realm of Angmar. And to start off with a bit of history, Angmar was founded in the 3rd Age 1300 by the Witch King, founded with the sole purpose of destroying the successor kingdoms of Arnor who had divided in 3rd Age 861, these kingdoms being Arthedain, Cardolan, and Rudaur. Arnor was refounded by King Argaleb I of Arthedain, and Cardolan joined under Arthedain's suzerainty. However, Rudaur resisted, and in 1356 Argaleb was killed by an assault from Rudaur and Angmar. His son Arveleg I fought back alongside the forces of Cardolan and Lindon, holding a front line along the northern hills until 1409, when Angmar pushed back and captured the Weathertop, slaying Arveleg I alongside the last prince of Cardolan. Arthedain would hold for 500 years until in 1974 of the Third Age, Angmar assaulted and occupied the capital city of Fornosterine. King Arvedui fled to the north and was hunted there. His army attempted to hold back the forces of Angmar, but all hope was lost. Lindon sent a ship to rescue Arvedui, who boarded it, but it sank in the Ice Bay of Forest Shelf, thus ending the line of the kings of Arthedain. 1 year later, Eomer, the Prince of Gondor, would arrive and defeat all of Angmar's forces at Fornosterine, and Angmar was no more, though he was too late to save the kingdom of Arthedain. Unfortunately for Eomer, the Witch King managed to escape into Mordor. Now, in Divide and Conquer lore, the remnants of Angmar slowly rebuilt the realm, knowing that Gondor would not return to aid the men of Eriador. Orcs are called from Mount Graham, and their wargs are bred in crude stables. The Hillmen raised soldiers for war, the forges of Carndum have been rekindled, and the ice tower of Barad Heleg has been rebuilt. Overlord Agendaur prepares the realm for war against the free peoples of Eriador. And if you don't know, Agendaur actually comes from an amazing game called War in the North. Lord of the Rings War in the North. Good luck buying it for a fair price nowadays. But it is a nod. He's not an official character in the lore. He's not written by Tolkien, but I think he is very, very fitting, and he has a cool design. So, role of cool takes over the lore purists, I believe, in this scenario. Anyway, starting off with Angmar, you have 3 settlements and a fort here. Litash, in the northeast of your realm, kind of bordering Gundabad, Mount Graham, and Carndum. Do know that all of these settlements, and Litash is a stronghold, and Mount Graham and Carndum, being unique settlements, count as huge cities / citadels. So you have 3 very good starting settlements, though economically they are not that rich. On very hard, you start with 9,000 gold, and even though it shows you're making a profit, you actually appear to be losing money for whatever reason that is. You also start with a spy as your only agent, and you have 5 generals. Overlord Agendaur, who starts in Carndum, he is your faction leader. Hunvorn, a Barrow-Wight leader who is in the fort just south of Carndum. Lord Sild, your faction heir, who resides in Litash. Morholt the Hillman in the fort by Mount Graham, and Drengu the Bloody, an orc who has a very strong general, perhaps one of your best, in Mount Graham itself, alongside 2 units of Warg Raiders. Those are your lords. They are all unique bodyguards, as you can see here. Agendaur comes with Temple Wards, a unique unit only to him. You will not be able to train these units. Only Agendaur himself comes with that unit. Hunvorn is, of course, the Barrow-Wight general. Going to Morholt, he is a Rudaur savage, probably one of the weakest generals you have. Huskarl, I should say, not the savages. The savages are a tier below him. Drengu the Bloody, arguably one of the most useful, being a cavalry archer general. I remember I was talking about the cavalry archers from Anduin in the Anduin overview, and I don't know if I mentioned Drengu or not, but someone did mention that I forgot about the Kondish horse archer generals, so I still will hold firm that cavalry horse archer generals are quite rare, so he is very valuable and very worthwhile to keep alive. And Lord Sild comes with a unit of Dark Blades, a very powerful, strong in melee ranger unit with very long range, very high accuracy. So you have 5 very strong generals, and your generic general you can recruit in Cara-Dûm or through adoption, would be anyone with Witch Knights, who are a very powerful sword and shield units. So we've gone through the generals. Of course, for nearby factions to the south, you are pretty much surrounded by rebel territory along your borders, except to the northeast where Gundabad resides. To the far south, you will have Imladris and the Dunedain. To the southwest, you have the Dunedain and Bree. And to the very, very, very far west are the dwarves of Ered Luin, but they will be reaching your front line before you know it. So they expand quite quickly, I must admit. So you must expand quickly, and you have many enemies, being, of course, the elves, the Dunedain, the men of Eriador in Bree, and eventually the dwarves. Alternatively, you could also turn on Gundabad, but they are currently, I believe, your only starting ally. Yes, you are allied to them and the Goblins of Moria, and you are allied to Mordor. You do, however, start at war with all of the other factions, the Dwarves, the High Elves, Bree, and the Northern Dunedain, and you will find no other allies in this region. So going into expansion, I'll toggle off the Fog of War here. You do have Barkellig right at your borders. Angsul is a castle, and then Athilin, a small village, Gobadrine, another town, Nokvaragla, another town, and to the south, more of a Tarth. Outside of that, you will approach pretty much other faction territory, so it's a good idea to grab these as quickly as you can. So do note Athilin is arguably one of the weaker settlements, being just a village. For personal recommendations playing as Angmar, I would typically recommend focusing either south towards the High Elves. Camithbrin is a very respectable settlement. Imladris, of course, is a very key settlement to own for a reason we'll go into later in the video. Alternatively, you can just kind of push evenly and expand into the Northlands, eventually reaching Deadman's Dyke and Osul, though I do believe the Dunedain do get Deadman's Dyke in the turn 1 auto expansion if you play as Angmar, but all the other settlements here should be free to grab: Gobadrine, Angsul, Athilin, Barkellig, Nokvaragla, and Morvatar. So you have quite a lot of places. Barkellig is actually one of the better moneymakers. It borders many provinces, as you can see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different settlements it borders, so it gets a lot of trade income, so you definitely want to take that, and why wouldn't you? It's literally right there. Anyway, going on into Angmar scripts, of those you have 2 of those. The first one is the Witch King script. So if you hold both Cara-Dûm, Imladris, and you take Fornost-Rhine, which was somewhere over here, I should turn that back on. If you take those 3 settlements and hold them, and Mordor is still alive, you will receive the Witch King with a unit of Temple Knights, and he is a very formidable bodyguard. The Witch King of Angmar can return to your nation. And the other script is anywhere that has a Barrows resource, which I believe there is one in Cara-Dûm, because we can... I thought we could recruit Barrowites here. Yeah, there is one somewhere in around Cara-Dûm. I just don't see it right now, but I know it's out here. Yeah, I can't see it, but anywhere with a Barrows resource, such as the Barrow Downs, Fornost-Rhine, here you can see the Barrows. Of course, all over in Mangalan, any of those regions, you will be able to train Barrowites. There's also some in Numenos, and I believe that's it, actually. I think it's just these few settlements. There might be a few more odd ones here or there. Looks like the Osul has it, and there could be one around the Angle, or maybe Imladris. I could be mistaken. But mostly, you'll find those if you take those settlements. You do get the Barrowites, who are a free unit and completely worth recruiting anytime you can. They are very powerful. As for buildings, it's pretty straightforward for Angmar. You are a level 4 armor nation, so one above the lowest tier, which would be 3, which pretty much all nations get. So you do get the heavy armorer. As for buildings, when it comes to recruitment, you have 3 different barracks lines. You have the standard barracks, which gives you both infantry and archers. And then you also have the Rudaur camp, which will give you your Rudaur units, so savages, pikemen, landsmen, huskarls. And then you also have the Warg camp, of which these both have only 2 tiers. Do note the Mount Graham stables and the Rudaur camp require a Lord's Hall, while the Army Barracks requires a Royal Hall, which is the Tier 4 if I'm not mistaken. So you'll need a Tier 3 Town Hall to get your Tier 2 buildings for the Radar Camp and the Warg Stables, and then the Royal Hall to upgrade your barracks. The second tier barracks only requires a Tier 2 Hall. So as for building recommendations, definitely get your Great Hall and a Great Barracks. This is where most of your bread and butter units are going to come from. And then work your way up with your blacksmiths and your castle halls. You can get your Royal Hall very quickly depending on how you rush it. Of course, you could go with a Mason's Guild into, like Mason's Hall into a Guild House rush. That does save you building time. I haven't actually tested it out to see what's quicker, either just going straight for the Great Halls or going for the Mason's Guild. But the Mason's buildings do always save you money, so it's typically recommended. I always say get the first one. Building times reduced by 20% and 15% for a building that only takes 2 turns and 1,000 gold. That saves you a lot of money, and it does end up saving you time. Anything that takes 5 turns, for example, to make will only take 3 with the Mason's Hall. I don't recall if that works for buildings that are 4 turns, so 20% of 4 would be like 0.8. I don't believe it rounds up. I believe you would need the next tier for a Great Hall to only take 3 turns. Could be mistaken, and I could actually check that really fast. I might as well. This is for my own knowledge, so let's just do this really quick. The Great Hall takes 4 turns. If I do this, yeah, it still takes 4 turns, so it does round down for the turn time. So you would need a Master Mason's Hall to lower the Great Hall to 3 turns, and so on for the other buildings. But you can get your high tier units out very quickly, is what I was trying to say. Do note other things, of course, like we talked about, you do get the Tier 4 Armorer, regular ports like all factions, and roads, standard level 4 irrigation, though only at your highest tier of cities. As for guilds, you only get the Fighter's Pit, being a evil nation, which is honestly something that probably should change. There should probably be better evil versions of the guilds. However, this does give you access to orc fighters and orc hunters, and I believe it helps you retrain your wargs a bit quicker, but I'm not 100% certain on that if it helps them with the wargs. You also have the standard garrison halls and all of the other typical units you might expect. Pretty much unrestricted construction. You can go to large city and strongholds. Of course, citadels and huge cities are reserved for unique settlements. That pretty much does it for the campaign map overview. I mostly would recommend going down south. Of course, also build mines. Do note that in the settlement right over here, you do have gold as a resource, so it's very worth taking. Plus, if I'm not mistaken, you actually can get snow trolls in Morvatarth. At least you can with Gundabad, and I believe Angmar can too if you take Morvatarth and upgrade it. Also, iron mines have been put inside of Karn Doom, which is befitting of the Iron Crown. Do note in the west, the dwarves may either go neutral with you or they may attack you depending on the way that their ring script work. So you might be able to actually get an alliance with the dwarves if they accept the ring gift from Mordor. Though, do expect them to still want to fight you anyway, but you have a good roster for fighting back against the dwarves. The Dunedain, they do start off with the turn 1 auto expansion. They do get some strong initial armies to fight back with, and they will expand north rapidly. But once you deal with them, the men of Bree are completely weak. You outclass them in almost every single way, so you don't really have to worry about the Bree land. And if you do get this far where you're taking Bree and taking out the Dunedain capitals, at that point you've basically won the campaign. You could go south into Dunlin and Endwythe. You could eventually get to Gondor, but that would be a very, very long campaign. I will now transition it over to the battle map now so we can go over all of the units. And welcome to the battle map side of things. Now, I've split up the units here based on roughly the barracks that they are in, though there is one exception, and there is one single missing unit that I decided to omit, and we'll get that one out of the way. It is the Thralls. Those are pretty much just the basic 2 attack, 6 defense spearmen that most nations get. Virtually the same as the Valesmen in the Vale of Anduin, and there was a special unit that I wanted to put in their place, otherwise I would not have been able to fit them. So we're not going to include the Thralls in this video, but they're your generic spear unit. You guys should know how to use those. Anyway, going on into the Witch Knights, the General's Bodyguard, the generic version. You get 60 men per battalion. They have 10 attack, 28 defense, most of that being armor, so do watch out for enemy armor piercing, either arrows, artillery, or like melee troops. Most of their defense does rely on that. Their defense skill and their shield is high, but again, an axe in the back is not good for these men. They are reliable on the no, not the smo, and they do frighten nearby enemy infantry, so not only are they good as being a general, but they can also help to rout the enemy, either have them in your front line or have them try to flank. Just be careful with them, don't lose your general, otherwise your army has, I would say, kind of average to lower morale, though some of the troops are very disciplined. They're kind of a heavy, it's hard to say, they're kind of a cavalry, like a warg heavy nation with solid armor, but also light troops, so Angmar's in a very interesting place. They have quite a few elites. And then going on into the barracks, in the first tier of the barracks, you do unlock the Angmar infantry and the Angmar archers. So going through the infantry, 6 attack, 4 charge, 11 defense. They do get the shield wall, which does help them to push through enemies more so than it helps them to actually be on the defensive. So there is one defensive utility use of a shield wall, and that would be to put them into a very, very long spaghetti line, kind of like this. And that helps shield wall units survive a bit better against archer fire. So I do have shield wall, does help them to get through enemy defensive lines. Honestly, very solid spearmen. I believe they have an upkeep of around 235, give or take. Standard movement speed. They do have a bonus in forest and snow, but they do have a terrain disadvantage if they are in grassland, so do keep that in mind. Going on with the Angmar archers, they share the same look. They do only have 3 attack with a 3 missile average accuracy, decent range at 160 meters with 24 arrows. Honestly, kind of a, and they're kind of like the Anduin Veil in that way, where you have a low kind of attack archer unit, but okay accuracy. I think these guys are a bit better, at least when it comes to surviving. Maybe not 6 defense. I'd have to go back and look. But again, having an archer is always nice, and this is your earliest form of archer. So make sure you recruit plenty of these guys. They won't help really against the dwarves at all, pretty much nigh useless except against dwarven laborers, but up against things like Dunedain, wardens, Dunedain archers, they can do well against. Of course, most things that the Breland has, they'll do well against. And they can kind of counter-skirmish elven archers like the Teleri bowmen. Don't expect them to win those engagements, but they will do respectable damage. That's it for the first upgrade of the standard barracks. When you go to the tier 2, you unlock the Iron Crown Legion. We'll start here on the right with the Iron Crown Halberdiers, and also, I didn't mention, but you guys probably tell us, I put this on the Barrow Downs map. It just felt very fitting for Angmar. The Iron Crown Halberdiers, a 6 attack, 16 defense, tier 2 halberdier unit, most of that being their armor, so do watch out for armor piercing. The Dunedain do have quite a few ranged options for that. Of course, they do come with the pike wall formation. Being that they are halberds, they are good against mounts and they are good against armor. These guys can be used defensively or offensively. They don't, being that they're halberdiers, they don't take frontal charges that well compared to like braced spearmen or, you know, pikemen. But they can do okay, and light cavalry would make a huge mistake if they go into these guys. The Iron Crown Halberdiers are probably your best tool at taking down heavy cavalry. So anything that the elves want to bring to you or the Dunedain, these guys will absolutely crush them. Another unit they will absolutely crush would be the Merchant Cavalry, which I believe only rely on their shield and their armor stat and have no defensive skill, just like the melee version of the Merchants. So these guys are a very strong counter against those, and those are the only cavalry that the Dwarves of Ered Luin are able to recruit. So, pretty respectable halberd unit, you can see good use of them. In the middle here, we have the Iron Crown Longbowmen. Direct upgrade from the Angmar archers. Do note you get less men, but you go to high accuracy, which is kind of rare for an evil nation to have good archers, but Angmar does bring them to the table. A long range, 180 meters. I believe the Dalian Longbowmen are around 180 meters, or maybe they're a bit higher. Somewhere around this range. We'll get there when we get to Dale in a few videos. But okay, melee attack, 5 missile attack. They're not going to do amazing in melee, and they don't fight well against cavalry. But again, they are archers, nothing too special about them, but they have good stats and good defense. And then the Iron Crown Warrior, a 152-man unit, 13 attack, 16 defense. Pretty much any two-handed sword unit is going to have high attack. They usually rely on their armor, so again, armor-piercing units are a counter to them, and honestly, they're a bit hard to use up against the nations that you fight because the dwarves have plenty of crossbows. The Northern Dunedain have Dunedain Rangers, Woodland Hunters, the Dunedain Bodyguard, and the Steel Bowmen, which have armor-piercing arrows, and the Elves have amazing archers as well. So if you can keep them protected, they will do well in melee, but they are kind of an arrow magnet due to the fact that they have kind of lower defense against archers, only 10 total defense. So in melee, they do pretty well. Just keep an eye out for enemy missiles and also enemy cavalry. If they charge into them, they won't be able to take the charge that well. Going into the tier 3, we get 3 new units. The Dark Blades, which we will go through first since they are the first one I went to. Now these are your Shadow Rangers. They can put down stakes. They have 13 melee attack. Their missile is only 6, so they're really good in melee. Pretty much equivalent to the Iron Crown Warriors. It's almost as if you combine the Iron Crown Warriors with the Longbowmen at the cost of a little bit of defense, but you also give them more range and more arrows. They also have a bonus against all types of mounts. I believe that comes from, it might be the arrows themselves that are good against them, but it might be their melee weapon, though it's only a great sword. Very strong unit, 101 soldiers, kind of lower armor, only 8 there, so against other archers they can be shot down, but as long as you keep them out of range, the Dark Blades will get many kills. And of course, the fact that they get stakes, very useful. If you ever get down to Rohan, for example, that's the best type of unit you could field against them. Next to them are the North Guard, pretty much the direct upgrade to the Iron Crown Halberdiers. I guess it's like, give the Halberdiers shield, you know, 7 attack versus the 6 attack, so plus 1 more attack. So it is a one-handed weapon. Of course, being a mace, these guys are effective against armor. 24 total defense, again, very reliant on that armor, not so much their defense skill and shield to keep them alive. And aside from that, they're not too special. They don't cause fear, they don't inspire own troops, but just the fact that they have these maces makes them a very powerful tool, especially up against the dwarves. If you need to fight like Dwarven Iron Guard or Clan Lord Gore's Bodyguard, I forget what they are. The Gabilgathul Guard, these guys will do very well. They'll pretty much beat any heavily armored Dwarven unit, except for maybe something like Dragon Slayers would probably outmatch them. Very formidable. They're able to hold their own, and they thought that they had shield wall, but I guess that's just the Angmar infantry. No real weakness. I mean, obviously, artillery will want to target these. Cavalry can do okay, and mass missile fire will damage them. But if you have a unit in North Guard, they will be pretty safe. And just don't be reckless with them. Of course, you don't want to be reckless with any unit. And then also, I bundled them here just because it made sense. The Guardians of Karn Doom. Pretty much just put the North Guard on the horse, and that's what you get. So do note these guys are only available in Karn Doom itself, so they are restricted. However, you can retrain them with the regional retraining building. The I forget the name of it. The Way Station, I believe that's what it's called. The Way Station. But yeah, these guys, very worthwhile having. It's great to send them up to your front lines and train them anytime you can. Being that they're cavalry, they can maneuver on the campaign map quicker than infantry, so it's good to keep a steady supply stream of these guys. They get a slightly higher attack, up at 8, with a 9 charge bonus. 23 defensively. Actually lose a little bit of defense skill, though they get a higher shield stat. Not really sure what the reason for that is. I mean, it's the same shield, but it is what it is. I do know they also frighten nearby enemy infantry, and they are skilled against mounts, so good against fighting cavalry. If you can send these guys to flank something and you have them nearby, they'll probably rout most enemies that they go fight against, unless they're by their leader, in which case, slay the leader, and then the mass rout will come, and these guys will easily slaughter many dwarves, for example, charging them into the dwarves. They do a lot of damage. Elves, pretty much, honestly, one of the better heavy cavalry units in the game. Not the best, but I would say they would contend the top, like a top 10 slot for sure. Maybe I'll have to visit one of those one time. Anyway, that does it for the first regular barracks, the Iron Crown, and the kind of North Guard tier. We're going to go on next to the Hillmen. Now, the basic Hillmen are recruitable anywhere from your town hall, same as the Thralls, but thematically they make sense over here. Nothing too fancy. 4 attack, 6 charge is solid because they have axes, only 3 total defense. They do have a movement speed bonus, 105, but low morale. They do get a bonus against cavalry and wargs, which is interesting to note. So they are relatively swift, high numbers, but they do suffer in their defensive department. They will take lots of casualties. Basically, you just want to recruit these guys because they're cheap. Give them the battering rams, have them run into enemy archers, whatever you gotta do. They will die, but they will serve you cost effectively. Going on to the first tier of the Hillman camp, you do unlock the Rodar Savages. 6 attack, 8 charge, 6 total defense, so low defense, and that's kind of shared here with the Rodar units, so generally higher offensive stats. They do wield these large clubs or cannibos or whatever you want to call these, spiked maces. Good against dwarves, but pretty poor in head-on combat. Of course, being strike infantry, you want to try to get behind an enemy, but they do function well as general killers if you don't have like any cavalry nearby. Send these guys in to go slay an elven bodyguard or a like a Dunedain bodyguard, and they will kill the general given enough hits. Armor-piercing units are very good at doing that. Next to them are the Rodar Pikemen, arguably probably the most useful unit that the Hillmen Barracks has to offer you. A 3 attack, 7 defense pikeman, 4 charge, not that the charge really matters. Pikes are insanely strong in Medieval 2's engine, able to hold the line for a very, very long time up against the enemy. A little tip you can do with them is if you put them on guard mode, they will hold their ground where they're at, but taking that off of it and being in spear wall will make them actually push into the enemy. If you want to hold a line of spears, use them on guard mode. They'll do less damage over time, but they'll keep the enemy more at bay and they won't advance themselves. But when you are ready to push forward, just turn on the spear wall, turn off the guard mode, and they will do very well. Their mobility is limited. Being that they are pikes, they are pretty much very safe against cavalry. Cavalry does not want to engage them, or cavalry will die. I highly recommend having as many of these guys in your army as you can to kind of buff out either your front line or your flanks from enemy cavalry, and they're very, very survivable. So a very good unit. Just do keep in mind, weakness to archers at only 3 defense. Against arrows, 3 armor is quite low, but you have plenty of tools to circumvent that, such as your many, many units of wargs. And then we go into the upgraded Hillman camp. You have the Rodar Landsmen, a throwing axe unit, effective against armor with their throwing axes, and I believe their melee is not effective against armor. It would say somewhere in here. I believe at some point we went through all the units that had effective against armor in their melee and specified that, so I believe they just use regular hand axes in melee, but 10 attack, very strong there, 9 attack with the missile. They do get 3 of those and 65 meter range. Quite a solid unit, but do keep in mind, for some reason the AI loves to target units that have high missile attack, so they will draw a lot of archer fire to them, as well as they should, because 3 volleys of 9 missile attack throwing axes that are good against armor can do a ton of damage, and basically renders any unit that they get those 3 shots off pretty much dead. It doesn't matter what they are, they will die against 3 volleys of throwing axes, so Landsman, pretty solid unit, but they will be targeted by enemy archers. That's just how the AI is. And then next to them, the Rodar Huskarls, pretty much just an armored elite version of the Rodar Savages. Though I say elite, they're not that strong. They're kind of weaker than the Iron Crown units, but better than the Angmar tier. Good against armor, good movement speed, 7 defense, or 7 defense in armor, and 6 in defense skill. But they do look magnificent, don't they? I actually really like the Rodar units. I do wish they were maybe a bit stronger, but it is what it is. Hillman camps, the only downside with them is they are quite expensive for what they offer, given that you're only really getting 4 units, but they kind of fill specialist roles that you don't normally get. So your armor-piercing shock infantry and your pikes and throwing axes. So going into the wargs next, we have at the standard warg camp, you get the Warg Raiders, a 444 horse archer, well I should say warg archer unit. I believe they are the only warg horse archer unit in the mod, because the goblins get a warg crossbow unit. It would be them and their upgrades, so only Angmar gets wargs with archers on them. Not that great in melee, kind of low defense skill, weak to archers. They do scare horses, but they don't necessarily get a bonus themselves against. Oh, no, they do get a bonus against the horses because they're wargs. Kind of average accuracy, a lot of missiles. Just use them to pepper at the enemy, kind of get into archers. They can do okay on the charge, being that they are wargs, but they are pretty low in the melee department. If you do want a more melee-focused warg, you do have the warg skirmishers, going up to 5 melee attack with a 6 charge and 8 defense, so a bit of a boost there. And then a 8 attack javelin that is effective against armor. They get 4 of those, though the accuracy is only average, and that's average for an orc, so it's quite low. They can do some good damage if they're parked next to like an enemy heavy armored unit and they're allowed to stand still. But I have noticed, this might only be anecdotal, but in my many years of Medieval 2, I've noticed that when mounted skirmishers are moving, they seem to have less accuracy. That could just be a coincidence, but it's something that I feel like I've noticed, so do keep that in mind when using mounted skirmishers, that if you keep them moving fast, they might not be performing as effectively as they could be. Then, when you upgrade the stables, you do get the Mount Graham Marauders, your first dedicated melee warg unit with 8 attack, a 9 charge, and 16 defense. These guys are very well. They have a 7 secondary attack, so after the charge, they do have lower attack than they would have during the charge. But good at standing in melee. Ideally, you want to cycle charge with them and take advantage of that high charge as much as possible. But they are very formidable. And look at the helmets that they give the wargs. I absolutely love that. These spiked, heavily armored iron plate helmets that they wear. I imagine if the wargs just headbutted someone, that would do a lot of damage. Very good unit. Definitely get as many of these as you can. It's always good to have heavy cavalry, and this is, well, it's not the heaviest cavalry in the game, but it's the heaviest that you can get besides the Guardians of Karn Doom, who are again limited to only Karn Doom. Sharing the tables with them are the Mount Graham Raiders, so an upgrade of the Warg Raiders, 666 instead of 444 with 13 defense, high accuracy instead of average with, I believe, better range there, 32 missiles. Very solid cavalry, and they can do okay on the charge. One thing about horse archers to note is that they do have a very fast fire rate, being tied to their animation. So they can actually get rid of all their arrows quite quickly and do the damage they need to, and then switch to melee missions whenever you need them to be. Good units, especially great to have them. I'm personally more of a fan of the Warg Skirmishers than the Warg Raiders at the lower tier, just because of their better melee stats. I find them to be a bit more usable, especially against the dwarves. I don't know why you would bring Warg Raiders or Mount Graham Raiders up against Arid Lewin, but I mean, maybe, I guess Broadbeam Marksmen would be okay to have them to fight back against, but really, you'll want Warg Skirmishers and Mount Graham Marauders. Now, going into our 2 specialist units here, first of all, the Barrow-wights. Pretty much, you know, very powerful undead units. They are relentless, 12 attack, good against armor. They frighten enemy infantry, and they do have 2 hit points. Most of their defense isn't defensive skill, so they do have a weakness to arrows, and they are quite, actually they're faster. I thought they used to be slow. 115% movement speed. These guys are actually speedier than I remember them being. But just the fact that they are relentless makes them very powerful in melee. If you remember earlier in my beta videos, they did have a different look, but that has been reverted back to this look. Basically, we lost the permission to use the other model, which is totally fine. I think this model of the Barracks is just as acceptable. Very good unit, and they are free, so if you recruit them, they do have a recruitment cost of, I want to say, 1,000 to 1,200 gold, but their upkeep is free, so every time you can recruit these guys, you should be getting them. And then finally, while not technically a part of the Angmar's roster, they are available in Morvatarth when you upgrade the town. These are the Snow Trolls, a very powerful variant of the Trolls, only second to the Olog High of Mordor. Good against mounts, frighten the infantry, powerful charge, 42 attack, though not armor piercing, but you don't need armor piercing when you have 42 attack. 13 charge, 36 total defense, and they are locked on their morale, so they do not rout, they do fight to the death being trolls, and they are very fast, so they are very fitting, being that, you know, it's the realm of ice and snow, though they are kind of technically more so a Gundabad unit. but I think they more so fit in Angmar's roster. Anyway, that pretty much does it for the Angmar overview. The next one we will be having is the Ardunium, who I did pitch in a battle here, but looks like they are way on the other side of the hill, so we probably won't see any fights happening against them in this cutaway here. But yeah, next episode will be the Ardunium, followed by Dale, Golemroth, Dolguldur, Dorwinion, the Dunedain, Dunland, and so on and so forth. I've actually alphabeticized the list, so I actually know who is next. So if you guys are enjoying the series, of course, leave a subscription on the, to my channel, like the video, and do all of that. And if you have made it this far to the end of the video, I will be leaving another link to that GoFundMe in the link of the description of the video. So if you guys do want to help me out, even a couple dollars helps me out a ton there. But that is pretty much it. So I hope you guys are enjoying the mod, and I will see you all again next week as we check out the Ardunium. Until then, my friends, farewell.